Welcome, folks. It's MSP Confidential time. It's Friday, 12 noon Pacific, and today's a real special treat. I get to welcome my good friend, Mr. Juan Fernandez. Juan, welcome to MSP Confidential. I've been begging you to come on the show for months. It's been like pulling teeth to get you to say yes. He's like, soon. It'll be time soon. And so today you're joining us from some undisclosed location. PAX 8 conference is right around the corner, starting on Sunday. A
Yeah.
bunch of us will be down there for that. Tell me about your background there. What's going on?
Hey, man, I am so glad that you asked me to join MSP Confidential. And just like the name of the show, it is confidential. So, oh, you zoomed too far out. Look at it. Now you actually have the image in the background. What are you doing? That being said, as we know, something is around the corner and beyond is here. So excited. Looks like we'll be having some fun soon. And just so happened, I commandeered a little area for us to have a wonderful conversation today, brother.
Well, I love it, and it's always a privilege and a fun time to get to chat with you. Um, Not just because of your obviously long time experience as an MSP and having grown an MSP and built out an entirely new business model effectively for that MSP. But also, you're now on the vendor side. You're with Super Ops, of course.
Mhm.
Congrats, by the way, on the new office opening in
Thank
Dallas.
you.
I
That was
saw
awesome.
some, I saw some of that. The ribbon cutting is quite neat to see, and so kudos. Obviously, growth is exciting. I'm sure the family's excited to get you out of the house and go work from the office for a change, right?
Oh, I don't know if that's actually the case. My wife is like, "So you're moving out now, huh?" And I'm like, "I'm not moving out. I'm just working from the office." It's so funny.
That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to see you, man, on the weekend. A couple days from now, we'll be converging in Denver, on the outskirts of Denver, Aurora, Colorado, for the PAX 8 Beyond conference. So looking forward to seeing you. Our usual brotherly embrace, and
Yes, absolutely.
that's some good times. And I'm sure PAX 8 and Rob and team have some incredible content planned for everybody. So definitely looking forward to that. I pulled out from the bookcase right behind me this very special book, and you and I were chatting about the topic for today, and you had this comment. You said the mechanics of the modern era MSP, and so I threw that into the title, and I think it's an incredible thought experiment to be thinking constantly in whatever business you're running. Are you part of the change? Are you part of the evolution?
Mhm.
Or are you kind of,
Yeah.
lagging behind? And there's been an interesting, I guess, when you travel overseas, you probably experience this a little bit. The
Yeah.
European MSPs or perhaps in other geos, they often refer to themselves as laggards behind sort of the North American MSP business models and such like. I'm not sure that I believe that entirely. In many ways, they are more advanced than the North American MSPs. Than they realize. But there's this term in the book, which again, I'll highly recommend this for any MSP wondering about strategy, customer success, and thinking about how to take the next step in their business. It's a great book. And Juan, you were one of the co-writers of this, along with
Mhm.
Matt Lee, Wes Spencer, and Marnie Stockman. It's a great read, easy read, and lots of great ideas. One of which is this idea of curve jumping. And I thought I would open the conversation with this idea of curve jumping. Maybe since you're one of the co-authors, you can explain this idea of curve jumping a little bit and how it applies to MSPs in the larger sense.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, when we think about the modern era managed services is like, when you're on I've always thought about this, and when you're on a ride and you're building a business, it feels like it's flat, right? And when you think about the curve in managed services and the waves that we have to manage and ebb and flow through, similar like what we went through with the pandemic, technology keeps moving up and down constantly, right? We see the highs and lows, we see the adoption, we see the, you know, the apprehension over the years, and we see growth in our business, and we see stagnation, we see flat lines, like we see all these things. And so one of the things that we're talking about in the book is like, how do you actually take that and use that momentum to kind of propel you out? And really, when you're looking at the wave of the technology, you know, I saw it in 2014. I knew that managed services and the new modern era of everything as a service was going to be something that buyers wanted to buy, because I was paying attention to the millennial marketplace, right? And so that's why I jumped back in 14 and built my managed services practice, because I was building for the future of the modern buyer, right? And so in the same case here in the book, we have to start thinking about how technology is shifting over the last 5 years. We saw rapid expansion and a lot of different things change over the pandemic that shifted everything. And this is where that curve jumping really, highlights itself, is that you're taking all of those things and actually like jumping past the curve and actually redeveloping your business. And so this is where we're at now. And when we think about the modern mechanics of managed services, there are a number of nuanced things that, if I'm, Jay McBain says this, skating to where the puck is going all the time. And if you pay attention to a lot of the research that's out there and the way people are buying, I might be doing something a lot different than I'm doing today in a very different way. And so that's the whole element of curve jumping, is to take that and harness the information and actually jump past it. So you can actually land up on the front end of the wave instead of on the back end of the wave.
Mm.
And that's really the beauty behind it, is trying to like position your business to ride it, ride the wave out and get ahead of that curve.
Yeah, it feels like this, I guess, eternal struggle of being working in the business or working on the business, and it's an interesting dynamic, I guess, because
Sure.
you go through phases, I think, of feeling like you're ahead of the curve, getting in front of
Yeah.
the issues and the challenges in your business. And then there are times when, for sure, like it feels like the world is just kind of crumbling in on you, around you, and so on. And
Yeah.
it's tough, sort of, to return, I guess, to your pragmatic self and just do the work, one foot in front of the other, and just kind of pace yourself through the obstacles. And I suppose not everybody is cut from the cloth of just like breaking through some of those challenges and just being pragmatic and doing the thing. And so this is, I guess, where you see some of the MSPs that really pull away from the industry, the top quartile, and so on. And maybe is perhaps why Service Leadership reports that 31% of MSPs lose money on any given quarter. But
Yeah.
but I'm curious of your thoughts, like, an exercise. And I've always thought of you as a very pragmatic individual that just forges through the challenges and the obstacles. And so it takes a mindset, I guess. And my question to you is, what advice do you have for MSPs finding themselves in that struggle of perhaps not knowing what decision needs to be made in this moment to power through? But
Yeah. It's a number of different things, a couple different places. And I frame this up, and I have an equation that I share a lot with a lot of folks, is if the problem equals Juan, Juan is the problem. And, one of the things that I did in my early years was figure out, okay, a lot of stuff comes to me and I don't like it. It's not that I don't want to help people, and it's not that I don't want to do the job. I don't think every problem should land up on my desk. And I just don't think, as a leader, that's my job, is to like everything come to me. So empowering your people to be able to, make that change sounds great. But one of the things I recognized was building processes that empower people was my key to success. And so that's the first thing, is like, a lot of people say, what, I don't understand why this is still coming to me. Like, and this is because we hear the things like people, process, technology. It makes you think that if you hire people, they'll build a process that operates the technology and you won't have to deal with it. That is not true. It's process that empowers people to be successful, which creates great cultures. And if you build that process and you hand it to them and say, hey, here, try this out and tell me if it works. And they're like, yeah, it works. Okay, cool. Now you take it and run it. And if it changes, then fix it. right? Now I've given that problem away and it never comes back to me. Like it ends with them, not me. That's the first thing, is getting out of the way. The secondly, I think the biggest thing is
Hmm.
we oftentimes think about being a leader um, as everything has to touch me. Like I have to make decisions, and that's really that was an Achilles heel for me for many years in my first IT company, and that was stressful. And I'll tell you, the last IT company, the way it scaled so fast was I didn't have anything come to me. I let everyone else make decisions. I was like, hey, you guys want new products? Here are the 5 key things that we're going to be looking at. You build a business case, look at all of them, do the vendor due diligence, come back, present it to us, and then we'll all vote if we're going to move forward on that or not. And if it's viable, profitable, scalable, meaningful, and it equals employee success, then customer success, we'll move forward. If not, we're not interested in it. And I mean, those types of things empowered them to be successful, which removed me from it. And
Hmm.
it's just one of those things where I think when we're building our businesses, we stare too much at the problem instead of looking at how the problem happened. And that's where you have to kind of step back and say, hold on a second. Let's look at this the opposite direction and look up from this way instead of me always looking up at the problem. So it's just a different way, a different view. And I think we all started to see a lot of that over the last couple of years. And now we're starting to think a little bit differently. So I am excited about it.
Um, Let me throw a wrench into, again, you make it sound so easy, and this
I
is
know. I
I always
know.
try to put the hat of the small MSP on
Yeah.
when I'm talking about these things, because the hindsight, the retrospect is always like a-okay, right? um, and even the way we remember things from our own past, it's like the problems were just so easy to solve. But I think the challenge is when you're in the thick of those situations, and I think a little context here is that this idea of the accidental business owner, right? Because so
Oh, the
many
accidental entrepreneur,
MSPs
man. Yeah.
are not necessarily cut from the entrepreneurial cloth.
Yeah.
They just found themselves in that situation because something had to give and whatnot. You know the story and how it goes. And so I think the mental model or the framework for stopping and making decisions and analyzing a situation, or even the process of delegating, dealing with the whatever mental turmoil it means to you to give something off to somebody to handle entirely and you not know a thing about it, can be like a literal paradigm shift in that person's life. And so I'm curious if you can muster some times when you perhaps had to go through that change, and what was the thought process behind it? Because I think that's where the actual rubber meets the road in many ways.
I will say, I started off from a blank piece of paper on this second one, right? Just full transparency. I sat down and said, all right, here's all the things that I don't want to do. Let's tool for that. And again, down to this jacket. A lot of people ask me about my jacket. They're always like, dude, why are you always wearing a jacket? I decided to put my tool belt away a long time ago. And I know this. I used to clean computers, do break fix back in the early days. And every time I came in looking like a tech, they treated me like a tech. Even from that perspective, when I put on a sport coat, even though the first time I did it, it was very awkward. I was like, wow, I don't think I should be wearing this. Like, I'm a tech. Like, it's very weird. I don't even feel right in my own skin. It changed everything, the way people talked to me, the way people acted with me. And even those little tiny things make a big difference, right? So sometimes we overlook things that are so small that change everything, right? That's one of them. In terms of how I think about when I built my business, I focused on number one, everything I didn't want to do. Again, put on a suit coat. I'm not going to take it off. No, I'm not going to clean your computer. I'm going to build a business that's profitable. How do I do it? I don't want to do a help desk. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. But I do want to do this. How do I build all those other things? Now, the beauty of where we are today, and again, I mentioned in that book that you have, is, I'm thinking about this new modern era of business operations as a service, right? It's like, I don't have to
Mhm.
do everything evermore. I don't have to do everything. And as a matter of fact, a lot of businesses are clicking their way to success around us right now. So there is proof in the pudding that they need somebody to help them figure out how to use the things they want. I don't personally have to do the same things I used to do. So why do I keep doing them? Because that's my comfort level, right? And so when you start to think about those, and I used to do this, and I'll say this even like even when I think about problems, It's like a chessboard. If that problem keeps coming back to me, I'm going to document those chess moves so that it doesn't come back to me. And I'm going to draw it out. I'm going to make sure that it works. Again, going back to that root cause analysis mindset that we all have. How did the problem happen? Okay, let's go back through all the steps that it took to get to me and then fix it. Right. And when you do it like that and you tool your business to do what you want, the life you want to have, it's very different. It's a very different approach. I can tell you, the dog
Hmm.
wagged the tail the first time, and the tail wagged the dog the second time. And that's how I took mine and grew it. But you just have to think about it differently. I don't see no in the equation. When I see no, that's logic saying that there's a problem. Then I say, hey, creative, go fix that for me, please, and come back and tell logic. And then we draw it out, make sure it makes sense, activate the plan. You just have to use a different mindset to build the business that you want.
Do you feel that MSPs could reasonably learn from the industry? And I say this almost facetiously because it feels like no matter how much information and knowledge and sharing is there, everybody still goes and does the same things and goes through the same mistakes and does it their own way, or
Yeah, yeah.
feels that they can do it better, what have you, and kind of end up back on the thing. Do you think there is something to that? Like, does success equal doing your own shit job at this for a little while until you finally realize how to do it better?
Yeah. It's tough, and again, I'll tell you this honest truth right now, right here, so right where I sit. And the reason I'm still here is because the problem is not solved, right? And that problem exists because there's not a tool really that tries to help you get that done. Like there's tools to help you do things, right? To turn wrenches and, fix computers and monitor and secure parameters and, infrastructures, but none of them are set on customer success and partner success and helping you grow and scale and understand all those things. Like there's so many pieces to the puzzle that go into that. And that's really one of the big things that I think that we all lack in full transparency. I mean, we talk about the accidental entrepreneur. The only reason I can even say that is because I was one, right? Like I didn't know. I didn't know when I started my first break fix company back in early 2000s.
Hmm.
So now that I built my second one, let me tell you what, I knew everything I needed to know to build that thing and scale the hell out of it. But this is where I think there's still a gap there. And that's why it's going to take the community to rally together to actually make sure that we don't have anybody left behind. But I see it. It's happening. And I'm really honored to watch how many groups are standing up and all these peer groups and education groups and new paths forward that are actually helping young entrepreneurs find success in the proper ways.
Hmm. The topic is this idea of the mechanics of the modern era MSP, and I think what you're getting to, and it's kind of a bit of the takeaway I had from the book too, is if we're coming into this to do the same turning of the same wrenches, we're gonna quickly fail, and I guess the question is, are you seeing examples of people coming in and kind of being able to move past the turning of the wrenches into this modern era mechanics of customer
Okay.
success and all these things? Or do you think there's a rite of passage there? Because I think one of the challenges is that there's like, Marnie talks about it in the book too, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
The shit has to be working first, and I feel that there's a certain set of skills to just get the shit to work properly in the
Yeah.
first place, and you kind of build from there. And almost like you can't. There's perhaps a misbelief that you can't come in to do this sort of high level next gen MSP thing unless you have figured out how to do the basics, which a lot of those things are perhaps technical in nature. But I don't even know where I'm going with that comment or question. But
No, and I know where you're going with it. And I think, and I understand what you're asking. What does it look like? And again, that's the challenge about looking into the future is what are we going to be doing? Let's
hmm,
take a look at what some of the reports say from some of these OEMs that, for so many years and a lot of my, MSPs that I've talked to that are still transitioning out of break fix, they still talk about break fix services. And I'm like, guys, did you not see like AI enabled self healing laptops hitting the market in the next 24 months? Like,
Yeah, I noticed a
That's moving,
Lenovo. I
right?
noticed a Lenovo ad this morning. They're just now marketing them as AI laptops. Period. And I
I
thought that
know.
was fascinating. Oh, we're calling them AI laptops now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah, you have to make a choice, right? You're actually choosing AI laptops, and I don't know what the choice is that I'm making, right? As a consumer, I mean, if I take myself out of the technical realm and put myself in a standard business user, I have no idea what that is. And this is where I think this is where new value equations are emerging, to your point, is that we are becoming more educators than we were technicians. We're becoming more activators and enablers
Mm,
and communicators than we have ever been before, right? Before we'd come in, they said, hey, I got a problem. This just doesn't work. Now, it's going to be really hard for them to explain what doesn't work. How do you explain an array of questions that don't give me the output? Is that
Well,
still it doesn't work?
and so many more things work out of the box. We've for
That's,
years
I
now been
know.
talking about the companies that are born in the cloud, and all that stuff just works already. And so, what is the additional value that we're coming in to provide? And it's definitely not installing an app, because we're not installing anything anymore. And so this is, I guess, the crux of the issue.
Yeah, and that's where if you figure like even with what we're doing at SuperOps, I mean you can auto deploy devices now, like simply just as soon as it comes out of the box, boom, it's done, right? So I mean, if you think about all those things, that was time that we used to bill for, right? That was things that was project work, if you will. I mean, that was block time. I mean, break fix time. All the different things we've called it just disappears, right? And not to say that it all goes away, right? But
Sure.
we aren't building images anymore, right? So if you think about that, what do we got to be doing? We got to be double clicking and investing on the new technology. And that's where, again, when I think about the modern mechanics of managed services, I will say this, and Forrester did a report, and it's very interesting that 87% of buyers in the IT space focused on managed services. 87% of them say, I need a qualified technology solution provider to help me into the
Mm.
future. Now, that is a huge number, but are we at the point where we have upskilled ourselves to meet the need? It's moving fast, right? So, this is where I think we have to start really reconsidering what we're doing and really starting to pay attention to the value that we're creating and the things that we're focusing on. It's going to be too easy. It's too easy to sit behind that desk and let technology just roll right past us and say, oh, didn't see that coming. Yeah, we do see it coming, and you all see it coming. Like it's in your face right now. So, uh, you know, it's one of those things that we really need to start double clicking on and like, going back to our roots a little bit. We've been in firefighting mode for a while now. Now we got to get back into builder mode.
Yeah, I want to ask you about your experiences living in the gray area, if this is even a thing for you. And what I mean by that is, I think as human beings, we have this tendency to, go all in or not do it at all, sort of this black or white type of mentality on
Mm-hmm.
things. And this shows its head a lot in the processes of the things we do. It's like, oh, we're going to start doing QBRs, and suddenly you want to take on and do the thing for all the customers at all once and right now, and
Yeah.
and kind of once it's like completely overwhelming, then you kind of just move on to the next thing. And so we tend to deal in these absolute extremes of the
Mm-hmm.
spectrums of whatever it is we're trying to do, and I feel there's a lot of a lot to be said about that gray area of just being able to uh, plan accordingly. And a lot of it is, I guess, the context switching of the reactive nature of being in IT versus, the thing that you're doing that's going to take a year to do well. I don't know that we have necessarily the patience or the stamina in many cases to endure some of the context switching of that. But I'm curious
Yeah.
on your thoughts, and if you came across some of that, if you found yourself in a gray area successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it's always a gray area, right? Like anytime I can, like, starting off with the process and understanding how you're going to build tool and create your business requires you to have a process. Like there has to be a process for success. You have to have some sort of a thing that says I'm going to do a thing, because if you don't, it's called hope. And a hope business plan gets you nowhere, right? So I can hope I make money, and the likelihood is unlikely that I'm going to actually do it. Like if I can't see it, then it's hard for me to communicate it. It's hard for me and my employees to see it. It's hard for my customers to experience it. It's just you have to stop for a second and say, what am I trying to accomplish here? And then build to that, right? And so with me, it was a similar scenario. I couldn't fail the second time, right? I lost everything that first time. There was no way I was going to fail again. I made sure that it wasn't going to fail. And I looked at it from like 400 different angles and said, how do I lose on this? How do I lose on that? How do I lose on that? And I kept asking myself that question until every single move on that was win, right? And that's where the customer journey, and I talk about this, quarter in, dollar out scenario of putting a quarter in and how does a dollar come out of the machine every time. It's the same thing with tickets. It's the same thing with onboarding. It's the same thing with customer success. It's the same thing with employee satisfaction. How are you testing each one of those scenarios and building that process? It stops the gray area. And then when you give that mentality, I said that to you, like I talked about how I did vendor due diligence earlier. I wouldn't even create a product or a service until I had everything checked. All my sales team was up to date. My contracts were up to date. I had a customer target segment that I knew I was going to go after. I knew exactly how much I was going to make on it. Like, this is how I flipped that switch to grow my MSP so quick, because I knew exactly what I was aiming at. And here's the ironic part. It's not just in managed services. So I can promise you this. One of the things that I said this in the Super Summit last week to everyone, and it kind of came as everyone laughed. I said, the crazy part was that when I realized that not only did I not know how to run a business, but neither did my customers. And the strategy around how I was building my business actually bled into their success, and they inherited a lot of what I was doing, which built relationships where they were like, man, I really appreciate you building this, because like that process helped me empower my customers to be more successful. So thank you for that, because that was a really great bleed through. And this is why you have to do it. Like, you have to create a program and a plan that's going to be meaningful. And it doesn't take that long. I mean, write it down, draw it out. Like, you'll see it right away.
Do you feel like you had a leg up, having been able to shed the first MSP and then start again? Because I feel like there's this maybe baggage that we have. If only this, if only that,
Yeah.
then I could perhaps do. If I had the chance to start all over again, I would do it
Yeah.
this way. And it's interesting to see those conversations sometimes pop up on the Facebook groups or chats here and there. It's like, oh, if I was starting an MSP all over again, I would do it this way. It's like, why aren't you doing it that way?
I know. I see that. I hear that too. And I see it. And I'm like, I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't do it very much different than the last one I did. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it was far ahead of its time. It was actually probably 2 years too early in terms of what I was doing. That's why it grew so quickly, because I was able to find the target segment of customer. That MSP is still performing well, right? And I love the fact that it's still running like a top. Like, it's just one of those things that, yes, if I'm going to do something different, I'm going to focus on the technology a little bit different. I'm going to focus on the business outcomes a little bit different. My target customer segment might change slightly, because maybe my skills don't adhere to certain things. Like, maybe I'm not a CISSP. Maybe I shouldn't be in security, right? Maybe I should be doing other things that are not that. I mean, there's a new era of managed
Mm.
coming on the horizon, and it doesn't have to be what we've always done. And that's where I think that we all think that we have to do the same thing. You don't. Like, I tell people that all the time. They ask me, Juan, what's a magic number? What's a KPI that I should focus on? And I'm like, I'm not going to give you a number, because what's right for you is who you are as a company and as a business. Why do you want to be like everyone else? Why do you keep trying to be like everybody else like that? Find the number that's right for you. Is one better or zero better? I don't know what you're focused on. Are you focused on customer success? Are you focused on making money? Are you focused on employee satisfaction? Is this legacy? Is this lifestyle? I mean, every one of those KPIs is going to be a billion different arrays of different. So what's right for you is very different. And I love the fact that we can be different, right? And still very the same. So it's a slippery slope, but I would say I'm excited about what's coming, right? I
Mm.
see a lot of folks building some really creative stuff. I see them emerging in different ways. You're seeing them jump into, like, marketing and sales and doing all these other things. I actually had a guy that had an MSP. He was talking to me. He's like, this sales thing's really tough for MSPs. What if I automated this? And I'm like, that horse has been beaten a few times, but if you changed it a little bit, it might make sense, right? So this is why it's so fun to be here right now. And I'm
Mm.
excited about this era that we're living in.
So in that example you're giving just now, the KPI and why do you want to conform? I think it's interesting because I think it takes a lot of maybe counterintuitive force
Sure.
to to like step outside of the academic best practices that are beaten, into people with the sledgehammer day in and
Hmm.
day out. And you hear this all the time. It's like, oh well, the industry, the acceptable practice is this. It feels like sitting down at a blackjack table. What does the book say I should do on this?
Oh, dude, you
And
don't play blackjack with me. I break the rules every time. I'm like, they're like, dude, you don't play that way. You don't hit on a soft 16. I'm like, but that's 21. Why would I not? And they're like, that's not how we play. And I'm like, but I just won. I don't understand.
yeah,
That's
and,
I
and
hear
so
what you're saying.
Yeah, so my point is, I guess there's always examples that kind of disprove the theories, and there's the outliers and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I think it's easy to be like to see an outlier and wonder, it's like, oh well, if they can't do it, why can't I do it? And then
Well,
realize that there were a lot of variables and forces, enabling them to be an outlier that perhaps we haven't arrived at yet. But anyways, your
I will say
comments.
this though. It's interesting because we get a very different look at super ops, at the way data is shaped, and because we do things differently. And again, when I think about this, right, and I'm always thinking about how do I empower my employees, and I'm thinking about the question that you always have to ask yourself. Even in one of the things you're thinking about when you're building your business, do I have the right talent, right? Oftentimes we bring in some projects that maybe are above our staff's level, and there's this, I have an expectation that they can do what I can do, and then we get frustrated that they don't, right? And it's oftentimes I hear a lot of people say, what's your biggest challenge? And they're like, staffing. And I'm like, what's the problem? They're like, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, okay, well, are they certified? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, so you have an expectation of an individual. You should only have the expectation that they Google and get the top 5 answers somewhat right. Why are you expecting them to get it right every time? They don't have the education,
Right.
and your program doesn't empower them to be successful. So when you look at data and you run the employee through, it's interesting to see where they're proficient instead of trying to cram them into a box that says you have to deliver at this level. Uh, I'm actually I'm actually creating problems when I do that. I'm saying no matter what, I need you to come up with a solution to this problem, and click completed. That's not a good way to force people into learning, right? And so when you have to, I like to see where the trend line is, like where are they actually proficient at, and then like kind of double click on their talents. That's where
Hmm.
we've looked at data the wrong way, and we've conformed to things to say this is how it should be done, which I think we might have pushed a lot of good people out because of that, because we didn't give them the tools that they needed to be successful.
And it is interesting to see sort of the big paradigm shift just generally in the workplace with the culture of like, why are we spending time trying to train people on the stuff they're not good at?
Yeah,
And why aren't we doubling down on stuff they are good at? And so I
just
guess we're,
changes your company,
yeah,
man. Like
yeah.
I can tell you that's why the longest email I've ever written in my life is who we are not. And you know what it was built around? My preface of when we started. I created an MSP to create dream jobs. I never wanted them to want to leave. And I made it to where they didn't have to feel like they did. And I played to their strengths, and I pushed them a little bit in areas where I felt like they were really emergent and able, right? And that's where we are not thinking that way and today, right? And we think about it like, hey, you got to hit 75% utilization or your job's on the line. Like, I don't know. I think that's we're using old tricks to try to move into the modern
Hmm.
era. I don't know if that's the best way to do it.
Well, and this is the thing about the modern era is, and I think we maybe take for granted that it's not necessarily an overnight transition or shift, that
Yeah.
it's going to take a couple generations of us, talking about it and shifting perspectives and changing the way we do things before. the new way starts to take a hold. But there is something to be said about the counterintuitiveness of things and what history has shown. But the times have changed, and I think that's an interesting variable that is always taken out of the equation when we look at how
Yeah.
things have been done in the past. This other book I've been reading, I'm not sure if this is something that you've been exposed to before. It's this book called Principles by Ray Dalio,
Mhm.
and I'm only like a couple chapters in, but it's an absolutely fascinating read because this is the guy that started Bridgewater Financial and had some really interesting outlooks on the commodities market back in the 70s, and was the kind of guy that could see patterns emerging and then go do the deep dive into the historical trends and what could be expected that nobody was seeing.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the interesting thing, is that we don't necessarily have this long history of MSPism to go back and look and see how the big emerging trends shifted the whole market and so on. But there's the human nature side of it, which is entirely predictable in many ways, I suppose.
Yeah,
And
and
so
I
what?
agree.
Yeah. What
It's
what
a
are the things that you constantly are thinking about are coming that people are just not shifting quickly enough to adapt for?
one of them. I think we're paying attention, and I say this often, right? It's like, take a look in the mirror for a second, and I ask some MSPs this. I'm like, I noticed the glimmer and the glint in your eye when you heard artificial intelligence, and I can see how excited you are when you go back to your office and you tell everybody how this is going to transform your business, and how amazing it's going to be to, maybe potentially at some point here very soon see where this could actually make you money. Like, you're super pumped. And then I think, were you that excited when your employees solved that ticket in record time? Same thing, same scenario.
Hmm.
No, we weren't, because we're paying attention to things that are very different, right? And I think as a leader, we have to be careful of what we're leading, right? And if we're leading people, then we need to be paying attention to them and being very focused on their soft skills and their needs, and looking at the things that I need to be doing for them. How is this technology? And again, this is why I let my team make decisions. I wanted them to make the decision on the future that they wanted for their lives. Is this something that we want to do? Is this something we can learn? Is this something that we can consume? Is this a life that we want? Right. And that's where I think we're kind of getting away from that. And we're really excited about this shiny ball. And it's scaring the hell out of our employees.
Hmm.
Like, they're like, man, they don't need me anymore. So if they feel like that, what are they going to do? Probably go look for something else to do. And that's one of the things I think we got to be careful of right now, is having real conversations with our employees about what this means for them. We're losing sight of that. I hear it every day. I see it in offices all over the U.S. And I'm like, hey, hold on a second. Did you see how they reacted to when you said that? And they're like, no, I wasn't paying attention to that. I'm thinking about the boat I'm going to buy. And I'm like, exactly. That's the wrong thing to be thinking about. These people carried you for the last 10 years, man. Like, come on, what are you doing here? So that's one of the things I think a lot about.
There's a ton of conversations, and you hear folks like Gary Vaynerchuk talking about this a lot. Maybe the last year or so has been this theme of we have to shift, at least in business. Because consumerism and the fight for attention, for people's attention, is kind of what's dominating a lot of the race in
Yeah.
apps and technology and so on. And these things tend to filter into business as they naturally do. And so our MSPs perhaps ill prepared for day trading attention in the context of their business
Mm.
conversations with customers. Are they just, not going to have the attention span necessary to talk about a strategic approach to, deploying technology in their business? Like, is
I
there
don't think
something,
so.
maybe we're not seeing coming?
I don't think that we're not capable. And I can tell you that because I didn't start off that way. And I have very elaborate business conversations now, right? So it's not that we can't, it's just that we need to place focus on what's coming, right? That out, one of the things in one of that Forrester study that I was reading, it said 65% of businesses are looking for outcome based technology driven solutions. right? So when we're thinking about, again, skating where the puck is going and paying attention to it, we have to be thinking about the conversations that we're having. We need to upskill ourselves there. And one of the things that I caution everyone against is like using modern technology to augment my ability to communicate. A lot of people are double clicking on that and sending off information, and when they arrive, they can't actually articulate that conversation in the boardroom, and that's a it's a dangerous place. That's also an
Mm.
erosion of our capabilities as a human race. But that being said, practice. One of the things that I used to love to do was called the gauntlet. And one of the wonderful parts was to get everybody to pitch the program to me. And I would do it too, because I'm not above anyone else. Like, I'm the same as you. And you need to start thinking about how you actually have those different business conversations and start talking in a different way and really focusing on what modern customers are looking for. And you know what? I'll be honest with you, ask better questions, right?
Mm.
Just listen for a little bit. Listen and learn right now. What do you need? How can I serve you? Like, the last thing you need to be doing is telling them about things that they don't really want right now. What they want is you to help them, right? And so if you listen, they'll tell you what they need. And then you can just articulate, okay, hey, here's what I heard you say. And this is the way I think we can step forward on this into the future. Does this sound like a good plan to you? Yeah, sounds fantastic. Let's do it. We don't know where we're going here. This is a very interesting future foray. We have to be careful and we have to be very cognizant and making sure we're taking care of our customers. And you talk too much and they're going to just find somebody else that'll listen. And
Yeah.
so be careful out there and start asking questions and figuring out, how can I serve you in this new era?
There's a great quote I heard from somebody the other day that in this busy time of like finding the more efficient way of doing just about everything in your life, for every efficiency we find, we just fill that time with just more things to do, and it strikes me as a real life skill to like
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
not try and fill the extra time with more things to do. And so I wonder like if this holy grail of efficiency, which is so I guess omnipresent in our industry, is maybe I don't know, snake oil, to put it boldly. But how do people create efficiency for the right reasons and not necessarily just give themselves more shit to do?
Yeah, and again, I think it comes back to your plan for your life, right? Like, let's just remove all the things that are not important to me. It's interesting. I'll give you an equation. This isn't a book that I haven't released, and I'm going to give you a preview of something that I learned as a very young guy. And to your point, this is also hindsight as well. And what I did was I said, okay, there's this concept of time is money, right? We know it as well. We all think about it. We don't always activate on it. We're like, well, my time may not be actually real, and it may not be actually valuable outside of somebody giving me money for it. So I won't quantify it the same way. But here's the thing: you got 8 hours of a day, and if you had $8 in your hand and you actually put those $8 somewhere on on the things to do list that day, it'd be very interesting for you to see where you're actually spending your time. Now, this slapped me hard in the face years later when I'd exited our business, and we started another couple, and before I built this second MSP, I thought about that concept and I started writing that down in this book called Time and Defining Time and Success Before It Defines You. And one of the things that hurt me really bad was not that I was throwing away my money and time, my $8. I was like, okay, well, six of it's, 6 to 7 of it's going to, you know, work every day. It was the dollars and the time that my daughters were standing and that they wasted while waiting for me to spend time with them. Now that hurt. And it changed me as a person at that moment to retool the way I was thinking about the next business that I was going to build. And it really brought to light like my actual worth in terms of just a simple little equation of figuring out eight, right? And where I was putting it and actually putting that down in my day and even going down to the minute and saying, where am I spending my time? Most of my time now is giving back to folks, right?
Mm. Do
Because
you think
that's
this
what,
is Do you think this is an inevitable or inevitability of where you are in the journey of life, in your
I wish I would
20s?
have known it when I was younger, man. Like I would have
But but
spent it way different.
but this is what everybody our age is saying now, and all the
No,
people in their 20s have access to that information now. Why aren't they doing it? And so this is my point about like
well,
the inevitability of your journey. But
Friday night in about 4 hours at 5 o'clock sure looks pretty attractive to go hit somewhere else and have a good time. I can tell you, I spent a lot of time having a good time. And will tell you, productivity was up like 110% when I actually started focusing. I mean, you're holding a few of those books. Like, it's just very different. No one told me when I was younger to, hey, work really hard now. They said, hey, go have a good time. You're young, have a good time. And I'm like, Gary Vaynerchuk says this. It was the stupidest thing he ever heard. Is like, whoever tells you to go and spend your time when you're young, having a good time and wasting it is ridiculous. Go work your ass off when you're young, build a business, and then spend your time enjoying your life when you're older because you're not going to have enough energy to do it anyways then. Like this is the challenge, right? And so, hey, look, I got a thumbs up. But that being said, one of the things is that again, we have to start thinking about time in a very different way. And it's across the board. So, yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that one. I wish I wish that I would have heard that when I was 20 because I would have done it differently. And I'll be honest, I did do it differently. I just didn't know enough to do it right. And that's the challenge.
one of the interesting things about this book, Principles, is he asks the question. I think a lot of people have values, and it's interesting the distinction he makes between having values and being principled. And I thought it was super interesting
Mm-hmm.
the thought process of like, okay, well, have you even articulated, like if somebody asks you what are your principles in life, could you even explain them to somebody? And it really kind of slapped me because I was like, well, I guess first of all, nobody's ever asked me, so I hadn't considered, if I'm a principled individual. Of course,
Yeah.
the natural answer is yes. Of course, I have values and I'm a principled individual. But the discrepancy potentially of like how you act against those principles, if there's gaps, if there's things, are kind of where this interesting thing called life happens. And anyways, I guess my question for you was, if you've ever thought about the principles, the guiding principles in your life,
Yeah.
and articulated them in a way that you could write them out.
Yeah, and I have. And the challenge of that is that a lot of the things that I failed at in life bent outside of the things that I should have stayed true to in the early days, right? I I know for a fact who I was and what I needed to do and all those things. And man, I tell you, having a good time steered me around all into a whole lot of bad places. And those principles, had I stayed true to them early on, it would have. I'd be in a very different place. I'm in a very good place now, but I would have suffered a lot less in terms of my upbringing and how I got to the place that I am today. And not a lot of people share that. And this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about is to tell people like, hey, here's all the bruised knees and skinned elbows that I got, like all these scars of life. Here's where I got them, right? And this is where we as a community have to give back to help others to define those principles, to say, hey, man, thanks for giving me that. I had a guy the other day that was like, bro, you unlocked my life. Like, you changed everything. And I'm like, good. And it's just that one at a time, man. We just got to help them one at a time, Luis. That's all we got to do. So keep sharing those principles, brother.
I heard this great comment, and I feel like I trade my life as a trading in quotes these days, but it was this idea that you don't have ideas, you just catch them. They
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
are, ideas are always just passing by, and you either catch them or you don't catch them. And I think this is one of those areas where like the ability or as I get older, I notice this a lot. I'm more curious. I'm more willing to change my mind on things.
Mm,
And you'd think it's the opposite. Like I thought older people were just stuck in their ways, and I guess you see this all aspects of it, no matter where you go. But I have all these things kind of influencing change in the way I think about things, the way my life is kind of playing out, and I find that interesting because I think in the context of business, if if you are committed to an idea, there's
yeah.
maybe a point where that commitment is no longer welcome. And so one of the interesting things I've been doing for the last few years is I collect all these conversational icebreakers and conversation questions. And one of the ones I recently heard was this idea of like, is there something that you are committed to that is no longer valid?
Right.
And that your their commitment to it is overextended and unwelcome now. And I
Wow.
find this happens a lot. Like people are scared of losing face in
Yeah.
their community to their people because changing
Mhm.
their mind maybe seems like a big mountain
Failure.
to climb.
Yep.
And so your thoughts on changing your mind and just being open to innovation of thought.
No, I got over that a long time ago. My rigidity was one of the biggest reasons that I wasn't successful in a number of ways, right? It's like I know what I'm doing. That is a crazy place to be. Like you just, what? No, like it changes every single day. And one of the things too is, again, I used to have this big fear when I was in enterprise, and it was called death behind the desk. And I made that word up because I felt like if I sat behind a desk too long and I did a job for too long, I would lose my skills and I would not evolve. So I continuously pushed myself into other forays and into other uh, types of corporations and other types of career paths so that I could stay sharp technically, right? And this is where I'm a big change agent. Like I love change. It's been one of the things for me. I think that's been the more transformative things in my life is my ability to iterate around change. The challenge is there's not a lot of people that enjoy that. And I actually have created structures in my life to create pressure. I know I perform really well under pressure, and so I create pressure situations to retool me and shape me into the refined portion of who I could be. Because without pressure, it's just comfort and I'm just happy and I don't have to do anything. And I could just do this for a while. And then something bad happens and you're like, oh my God, I'm so far behind. Like, what am I going to do? The world flew past me, like, and I was just like comfortable. What happened? And
Hmm.
this is the thing for me where even now, like, it's wired so deeply inside of me. Like I have to keep doing the things to build and tool and develop and design the future of what could be. Right. So you have to constantly push yourself to do that. And I think that a lot of people are starting to become accepting of it. I sat down with a lot of MSPs that are super summit. And we were up until 1 in the morning having meaningful conversation about, I think I was wrong. And I wish I would have known that a year ago, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix that right now. And then they call me the next day and they're like, dude, like I haven't smiled in a long time. And I'm like, yeah, I know it sucks, huh? And they're like, but I love where I'm at today. And I'm like, so just keep changing it, man. Like keep that thing moving
Hmm.
forward, and that's where we have to be change agents. This is not the era that we used to live in of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 20-year career. It ain't our grandparents' business anymore. Like this
Yeah.
thing is moving and changing every single day, and you can't sit on your laurels anymore. Like it's not going to work. You got to keep evolving. You got to keep changing. You got to keep moving forward. You know,
There
it's
it
my
is,
thought.
folks. The modern era in a nutshell. What one of the other books I'm reading, by the way, is this, and this is one of the longest term goals that I've ever set for myself, which is interesting. But it's the Daily Stoic, and it's a daily
Oh man,
passage.
that is a good book.
It's a daily
Yes,
passage, from a quote of a philosopher from the beginning of the century, like Marcus Aurelius, or
Marcus
uh,
Aurelius,
yeah.
man, that is some
There's a
good
number
stuff.
of folks in there, and one of the things that philosophy and Stoicism talks about is this idea of that, one of the hardest things, one of the easiest things is to know yourself, and one of the hardest
Mm,
things is to know yourself. Um,
absolutely.
but I loved your idea of like that the longest email you ever wrote was "Who are we not?" And it's an
Yeah.
interesting counterintuitive exercise to go through that because I think in our industry particularly, there's this real strong desire to be all things to all people and to please and to help.
Yeah.
And I think it comes maybe again as a dissonance into our lives to not be certain things to certain people. And so maybe talk a bit through that exercise of writing that email if you can put yourself back
Yeah.
in that moment mindset wise.
And it's just internally, like even for me today, like one of the things is, and I work, as I talk to MSPs, and we do an exercise called "What Your Customers Aren't Telling You," and it's basically where you line up with what you do with what they need, and then it teaches you how to ask the questions that lead back to you, which is the right question to ask, right? Instead of
Right.
asking, "Hey, do you know about AI?" That's a fake yes. Like that's not a real yes. You're not going to sell anything on that. Um,
Calibrated questions. Yeah. There's a lot of, yeah.
Absolutely. They're
Yeah.
very, very much, it's very strategic on why you do certain things. And again, engineering your business to do those makes it all work. But that being said, I did that in my own business and I said to myself, okay, self, what do I do good? What is it that I do as a business? And our tagline was, we deliver, you know, uh, quality products and services that everyone can afford for a price they can afford, but so we add so much value that they can't afford not to, right? And when you think about that, one of our key taglines was we're a digital transformation company, right? We deliver outcomes through the thoughtful use of technology, right? And that being said, I'm actually speaking to their language. I'm speaking their love language, right? I'm telling them I'm going to transfer you from where you are today to where you need to be. But how do you get there? And in saying that, there's so many things, right? But what do I do good? And the way I define that by is what do I do was, do I have a process, a procedure? Is it drawn? Does everyone know what it is? Does my contract support it? Do I have a sales methodology around it? Do I have talk tracks? Do I have everything that I need? And am I protected, compliant, secure? Everything around that
Yeah.
one
The
word.
the goal reverse engineered
Yeah,
to its
exactly.
entirety. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I go and say, here's everything that I am, the thing that I do best is deliver outcomes. I don't do anything else. Like everything else is just something that I do.
Function. Yeah.
The thing that I'm doing is delivering outcomes. So everyone's like, oh, we're a help desk. No, we're not. We don't even have a help desk in our office. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we had a third party help desk. I'm like, why would you think we're a help desk? Well, we sell help desk. That's not who we are. Right. And that's the interesting part. When you don't ask your team who you think you are, you'll never know. And this is why I always say, hey, business owner, tell me who you think you are, and like tell me about your business and how does this work, and then they'll walk me through it and I say, okay, cool, now let me go ask your team. And then I line these two things up and I say, wow, look at how different that is, right? And you're selling something that we can't deliver on. And that's the interesting part of it all, right? Is where you're
Mm.
looking at things from your own lens and you're saying, well, my reality is everyone's reality. That's not true. And this is why you have to consider what it is we do. And I'll say this, the best thing and the best moment as a leader that I've ever had in my life, and this is what I hunt for now and ever forevermore, was a smile on my employee's face to come back and say, Juan, it works. Our customers are happy. Like what we say, it actually works. And I'm like, yeah, isn't that what it's supposed to do? And they're like, I've never been everywhere else. We just say stuff, it never works. That is the moment you're looking for as a leader, to have your team come back and tell you, guess what? Our program works. It delivers every single time. That's when you know what you built works. And that's when you know as a business owner, you got something that's scalable. A, because your employees believe in it. B, because you can prove it. C, because your customers are talking about it. And I always look for those high watermarks of a lot of MSPs that say they have a lot of growth from their customers because of referrals. And I'm like, what were you doing then? Because you stopped doing that when you said the customer referrals stopped. And they're like, oh, yeah, we started doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, why?
There it
Why
is.
did you
Yeah.
do that? Like had a scaling, growing business, man. Like, what were you doing? And they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't know. And to your point, like we walk right past it sometimes because we don't know. And again, if you don't have that process built out, you're never going to see where the quarter stopped. So that's
Um, Joseph, thanks for the lovely comment. This has been my absolute favorite MSP Confidential conversation to date. Fantastic insights from you both. Simply inspirational. Juan, you are inspirational, man. I feel like this is the kind of conversation I long to have at every opportunity because there's always so many cool ideas. I tend to lean into the philosophical, and I love it when
It's
we
all
can
good,
sort
man.
of, you know, ride the fence a little bit of what's philosophical and what's practical, because I think some of these is where principled thinking comes from. Like again, there's so many things kind of
I know,
influencing
man. And then if
the
we put it together, it makes sense, and that's the
yeah,
beauty of it. Like all of these things, we both come from MSP land, right? Like we both built MSPs, we both exited MSPs, we both now work for vendors. Like it's the very similar in paths. So awesome.
yeah.
Love that comment, man.
Yeah,
That's
thanks for
awesome.
the great
Glad
feedback,
somebody got
Joseph.
something.
And this is kind of why it's exciting to do this. And I feel lucky to get to bring people on like yourself to come and rattle the cage, so to speak, get us thinking outside the box, and maybe affect a bit of that next change, that thing that needed to happen. I feel like this is maybe a 10-part series one. I don't know. We're gonna have to have you
Dude,
back,
I'll tell
and
you
maybe
what,
can.
I
Yeah.
have some surprises other than this confidential room that I'm sitting in that I promise you, the next time we have a conversation, we will have a different kind of conversation. It'll be very fun.
Oh man, you and the teasing all the time about all these things that you can never tell anybody about. I've about had it with you on this stuff. Um, okay, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been my very good friend and very smart individual, Juan Fernandez, channel chief at Super Ops. We're here every Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for MSP Confidential. Hope you'll join us again next week or in the future. And if you'd love to hear more from Juan, let us know in the comments. If there was an unanswered question that you had or something that spawned an idea, send us a note, and maybe we'll have him back to dig into some of these topics a little bit more into the rabbit hole, so to speak. But in the meantime, have a wonderful weekend. For those coming out to Denver for PAX 8 Beyond, we'll see you there. Thanks again, Juan. It's been so very special.
I look forward to seeing everybody, and thanks again, Luis, for having me, brother. I can't wait to do it again.
All right, and see everybody soon.